As we get started, some notes are going to come around, and I want to direct your attention to the screens as we continue today.
The flooding tunnel's over that ridge. We'll get in that way.
What was your job when you were based here?
Sanitation.
Sanitation? Then how do you know how to disable the shields?
I don't. I'm just here to get Ray.
People are counting on us. The galaxy is counting on us.
Solo, we'll figure it out. We'll use the Force.
That's not how the Force works. Oh, really? You're cold?
Come on.
Yeah, oh, it's dead today. It's dead today, Tommy. See, that's not how the Force works. We're in a series called Awakening. And I feel like some people get unique ideas about faith, just like they get unique ideas about the Force. How many of you guys have ever watched Star Wars before? Okay, that's like 99% of us. People get unique ideas about how faith works. Just use the Force, and we'll be able to figure things out. That's not how it works. Same thing when it comes to faith. There are oftentimes shortcuts we take to speed up the process of faith. And that's what I want to talk about today, some of those shortcuts. Because the reality is there is one way, and that's surrender. You guys ever heard that word before, surrender? It is giving up yourself, both hands up in the air. When we worship and we ask you to raise your hands, it is not just for a feel good, but raising your hands is a sign to God saying, I surrender to you. Now, unless you have a mic in your hand where you can't put up the other hand, oftentimes we do kind of one of these, or a one-handed whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it kind of makes me think, like, are you like half surrendering to God? What is that? What do you, I don't know. So I want to teach you today what it means to fully surrender to God. Because as you learn to do that, everything about your life will change. You see, when it comes to faith, we oftentimes pursue it the wrong way. Have you ever done something, and then as you were doing it, in the middle of it, you realized that it was terribly wrong, and you were wrong for doing it? I'm going to tell you a story. I have a younger sister. How many of you guys have younger sisters? Yeah, okay, I have a younger sister. So I was like, I don't know, 8, 9. She was 6. My brother was 12. And I had my best friend over. His name was Ricky. And we decided we wanted to play with my younger sister. And so we're like, hey, we oftentimes didn't play with her because she was a little annoying or whatever. So, but we wanted to play with her today. Like, how many younger sisters, you just want to play with your big brother sometimes? You know what I'm talking about? Right, okay. All right. So she wanted to play with us. We're like, yes, let's play. What do we have to play with? We have duct tape. Yes, we're going to play with duct tape. Hey, Brittany, we have a great idea. And I tell you, you're not going to believe me. You are thinking I'm lying. I'm not lying. This is 100% innocent. Innocent I was. I said, Brittany, what if we tied you up in duct tape like a damsel in distress, and then we'll come rescue you and save you. It'll be like, you're the princess that we come and rescue. Like, this will be a fun game. And she's like, yes, that'd be awesome. And I'm like, great, we get to play with duct tape. And I was innocent. You say, Pastor Scott, you're a liar. No, I was innocent. So we proceeded to tie her body up in duct tape. Her entire body with duct tape. Like, literally, wrapped it around her feet, her shins, her knees, her legs, her body, her arms. Finished it off with the mouth. And so she was so excited. She was covered in duct tape. And we were having a great time because we were going to rescue her. And so like, all right, what do we do now? We've tied you up in duct tape. Hey, let's go show Mom that we're playing nicely together. This is how innocent we were. We're going to show Mom that we're playing nicely. Mom was in the garage, and so she's like, okay, well, how do we get there? She's tied up in duct tape. So we're like, well, I guess you got to hop. So she starts hopping to Mom. So she's hopping over to Mom. And we're having a great time. Everything's awesome. And to get to Mom, there were 2 steps that went into the garage. And so she's going, and so she goes down the first step, and everything is good. Okay, great. And then she jumps off the second step. And that is where I realized I was wrong. I was wrong. I was playing with her the wrong way. Everything that I had thought up to that moment was terribly, terribly wrong. I was the worst. So here's what happens. She goes, and it happened in like a second, but I feel like it was like 5 years. So she jumps off the step, and you could see her start to get wobbly. And in my head, I was in front of her, and I was like, oh no. Like my life flashed before my eyes. Everything was bad. And she goes, and she's like happy, and she's like, and it went from to as she lost her balance. And she proceeded to fall. And I remember seeing her arm, like trying to put her arm out, and all she could do was, because we had duct tape her, and just the slow fall of doom and despair. And she goes, and all I could see was her chin right up against the floor. Proceeded with the flowing blood out of her chin, and then the noise of blood gushing, and we're like, no, this is not the way it was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to end like this. We were innocent. We were innocent. So my mom comes out, and my mom's like, what are you doing? Why'd you duct tape? And I was like, that's a great question, Mother. I don't know why I duct taped my sister. I don't know why. And so my brother and I are afraid that we are going to jail and we are going to be just terrible. Anyways, so she's there, and my mom is like, I need to take you to the hospital, but I can't take you all duct taped up. So I need to rip. So she starts ripping the duct tape off my sister's body. And that hurts because duct tape, it's like, you ever have a Band-Aid get ripped off your body? That doesn't feel good. Imagine duct tape all over your body being ripped off. Yeah, not fun. So she's ripping off. My best friend who was there, Ricky, he bounces. I don't know where he goes. We didn't see him till 8 o'clock that night. It was the morning. He'd left. What I found out later, he ran to the park across the street, hid behind a fence in a hole, and stayed there for 6 hours. Anyways, so I didn't run at least. At least I stayed my ground. I said, I'm going to take the punishment I deserve. And so anyways, I'm afraid that I'm going to die. My brother's like, we're done, dude. It was nice knowing you. Here's my will. Let's hide it somewhere. Okay, so we're going to die. So she rips the duct tape off, and we go to the hospital, and it's like, oh. And actually, we tried to convince my mother that we were trying to be nice. We were trying to play well together. It went terribly, terribly, terribly wrong. And I learned a valuable lesson that day, 2 of which. First of all, don't ever duct tape your sister. Okay? So for those of you out here, just don't do it. Just don't do it. The second thing that I learned was that sometimes, even though sometimes you feel like you're doing the right thing, it's possible that it could be terribly, terribly wrong. And oftentimes in life, we live our lives trying to figure out what we're supposed to do. What am I supposed to do with my life? And so we start making decisions and we start going a direction, only to realize that a lot of times the things we spend our time on are not what we're supposed to be doing. We're not focusing on what truly matters. There was a guy, his name was Saul. Eventually he became Paul in the Bible. Actually, he didn't become Paul. Saul was his Hebrew name. Paul was his Greek name. He was talking to different people. There was the Hebrew people that he was one of, but he was also a Greek, and so he had 2 different names, just like for some people how you have like a Chinese name and an American name, or a Russian name and whatever. Does that make sense? How you have different names because you're from different countries? So that's like what Paul was, Paul and Saul. In the story, he is Saul because he's talking to the Jewish people. And Saul, he was a stud. And we're going to learn how he surrendered his life to Jesus. Once you understand this principle, though, surrender is the cost of the supernatural. Surrender is the cost of the supernatural. You see God doing amazing things. You hear of people getting healed. You hear of victory. You hear of God moving radically in people's lives. You see these crazy stories in the Bible where Jesus walked on water, where people's shadows go by and they get healed, people raising up from the dead, all this stuff. How does all that happen? Surrender. Surrender is the cost of the supernatural. And here's why. The more of the flesh that there is, the more of you, that means there's the less of the Spirit. And in order to see God work through you, there needs to be more of the Spirit and less of you. Does that make sense? Simple equation there. But here's the thing. We oftentimes don't live that way because the flesh, it has some great things to offer. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to do what you want to do for a while. It's satisfactory. You enjoy it. You enjoy doing what you want to do, living your own life, living your own way for a while. You can be really successful living by the flesh, doing your own thing. You can be really successful, meet all the goals, be a financial billionaire, whatever, for a while. You might have direction in your life when you're living by the flesh. You might feel like you have purpose for a while. You might even have an identity living by the flesh for a while. But you see, the flesh always falls short. I'll get to that in a second. Here's the first thing I want to teach you guys, that first bullet point. Salvation equals surrender. Surrender equals salvation. In order to have salvation, what Jesus does to save us, it starts with surrendering. I'm going to tell you about the story of Saul. We're going to read a few verses. We're going to track through his life. Is that okay? Now, he has a pretty crazy story, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. How many of you guys have ever heard of Saul Paul before? Yeah, I was reading this, and God was just like opening up my mind. It was about surrendering. It was blowing my mind. So let's just get into it. Acts chapter 9. Check out the details here. So, Saul, still breathing threats and murder. Yes, that's in the Bible. Breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found anyone belonging to the way, aka if Saul found any Christians, men or women, he would bring them bound to Jerusalem so that they could be killed, was what it means there. Now, as he went on his way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light shone around him. He is going to a city to find Christians so that he can bind them up, take them back, and kill them, okay? That's his objective. And he's doing this in the name of the Lord. He's doing this in the name of the Lord. Okay, but the story continues. It's crazy. As he was going, here comes the next verse, verse 4. The light shone, hits him in the face. He falls to the ground, and he hears a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he's like, what? Who are you, Lord? The voice said to him, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and enter into the city, and you will be told what you're supposed to do. You see, Saul's story is not one of a sudden conversion, but of sudden surrender. We need to go back a few chapters to understand this. There's a guy named Stephen. Stephen was a disciple of Jesus. He was doing his thing. And Saul ordered Stephen's execution. And the previous chapter, we see Stephen go on a monologue telling people how Jesus is Lord. And even though he's going to die, he's going to stand up for Jesus because Jesus is the truth. And when you surrender your life to Jesus, you will receive salvation. And here's what happens, Acts 7:58. So as he's doing this speech, they cast Stephen out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. Saul was there. They're throwing rocks at this guy, and he's like, yeah. And falling to the knees, he cried out in a loud voice, Lord, this is what Stephen says, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. He died. And Saul approved of his execution. What? Pastor Scott, I'm in 6th grade and there's murder and all this stuff in the Bible? Yes, there is in the Bible. Saul approved of his execution. Why? Because he wasn't totally surrendered to God. Now, I want you to give a little info about Saul. You see, he had what would be like equivalent in today's time to 7 PhDs. Like there's Dr. Wayne times 7. He was a stud. He had Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. How many of you guys have read one of those books all the way through? How many of you guys have read all 5 of those books all the way through? He had all 5 of those books memorized. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, he was a master in the Old Testament. For them, it was just the Testament because it wasn't a New Testament yet. So he had studied it. He knew the laws of God. He knew it very well. But here's the thing. You can know a lot about God and never truly know God. He knew a lot about God, but it hadn't sunk into his heart. And so when Jesus was on the picture saying, I fulfill the Old Testament, he didn't see it. He was blinded to it. He wasn't living surrendered to God. He was living his own life. And so you see, Saul sees this. Saul sees Stephen. And even though he's getting murdered, thrown rocks at him to die, that's a terrible way to die. Even though this is happening, Saul begins to observe. And I can only imagine what went through his head. Like, I am killing you for having a wrong belief, and yet you are still praising your Jesus. Why would you do that? Why would he, I don't know. So Saul, he's going to Damascus, and that's like a week-long walk. You see, there weren't cars. They're on Camel Express. You know what I'm saying? It takes a week to get there. So he has a lot of thinking time. He doesn't have an iPhone, okay? There's no texting. There is no Instagram BC. He is just walking, doing life, looking, thinking about everything. And he's thinking about Stephen. And why would this guy still worship Jesus? And then God appears to him. Boom. And here's what happens. So he's on the ground. Jesus says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he has all these things in his heart. And this is what happens. Verse 7. The men who were traveling with Saul stood speechless. They heard the voices, but they saw no one. That'd be crazy. You're like, Saul's up there, and you're a few steps behind him because he's the man. And all of a sudden, you see him just like fall to the ground, and you hear a voice. Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he's like, ah! And you're like, what in the world am I hearing? You're hearing them too? Like, they're hearing voices. Okay, he's on the ground. So Saul rose from the ground, and although his eyes were opened, he saw nothing. I'm going to break that down for you. His eyes were open, but he saw nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And for 3 days, he was without sight, and he neither ate nor drank. How could he be without sight if his eyes were open? Here's the deal. It's not that God made him go blind. It's that God transformed Saul into his true self. But Saul's true self wasn't free. He was blinded to the actual reality. You see, the life that he had been living, he was blinded to how things really were. And so God opened his eyes. But even though God opened his eyes, he did not yet have eyes to see because he did not yet understand who Jesus was. And it is not until you bring Jesus in that you're able to see things as they really are. That's a good truth right there. Here's the second thing. Surrender reveals the truth. Surrender reveals the truth. If you feel like you're living a lie, if you feel like things in your life are not authentic, I'm going to look at your life and say, what haven't you surrendered to God? There's an interaction I had this last week, and actually it was kind of sad. And I thought about this, and I really wrestled with it. And I hope that if one day he's ever watching this video, that this speaks to you. We were talking, and he said, hey, I'm a half Christian. And I said, what? He's like, yeah, I'm a half Christian. I said, what does that mean, a half Christian? He said, I can be a half Christian. I like the life I'm living. Who are you to judge me? And I said a few things at the time, but then I went home and think about it, and it kind of broke my heart. Because to think like I'm a half Christian, I want to live the life that I'm living. I don't want to totally give up to God, but I believe God exists. I'm going to do this halfway. And there's a few thoughts that came to my mind. First of which, Jesus doesn't play second to no one. Like, he's the God of the universe. Remember your place. And that's a hard word, but the reality is it's there. Like, the God of the universe, you're going to tell him you're going to serve him halfway. The Bible says either be hot or cold, don't be lukewarm. God spews that out of his mouth. But here's the compassion. You can't be half in. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Sharice's grandmother has cancer, lymphoma. It's a crazy cancer that spreads throughout your entire body. What if she was to say to the doctors, hey, I only want to be half cured of cancer. I only want to be half cured. That wouldn't make any sense because, look, if you're only half cured, the cancer's still there. It will still kill you in the end. You cannot be half cured. It's either we take all of the cancer out and you're totally healed and then you don't have cancer, or even if you leave just a tiny bit, it will still grow back and destroy you. You cannot be half cured of cancer, just like you cannot be half cured of sin. To say, hey, I'm a half Christian, I'm going to live my life for God sometimes, but I'm going to live my own way other times, it doesn't work. Not because God's like vindictive or angry at you, but because you can't be half cured. You will still die if you're holding on to that sin. Surrender reveals the truth to you. but it also reveals the truth about you. Here's the deal. Surrender, when you surrender to God, it reveals what is true, that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But it also reveals the truth about you as to whether or not you're willing to make him Lord of your life. But God, I don't want to let this go. Then you're not willing for him to be Lord of your life. If you're trying to hold on, you will lose everything. Is there an area of your life where you have not surrendered to God? Is there an area where the cancer still grows in you? The story continues, and this is where it gets interesting. So Paul is learning what it is to surrender to God. The voice comes in a big light and says, go. And so even though he's blind, he goes into the city and he's obedient. He goes to the place where God shows him. He gets salvation. He begins that process. He begins to be obedient, surrendering his life to God. But he's not the only one in the story. Acts 9:10 says, now there was a disciple at Damascus named Ananias. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. And Ananias says, here I am, Lord. And the Lord said to him, I want you to rise and go to the street called Straight, into the house of Judas, and look for a man of Tarsus named Saul, for behold, he is praying, and he has seen a vision of a man named Ananias, a.k.a. you, who are going to come and lay hands on him so that he will receive sight. Do you see, like, God says, look, I have already told Saul that you're going to come to him. And Ananias was like, wait a second, hold the phone. Here, okay, wait a second. Lord, you don't understand this. You don't live here on the earth. You don't understand. I have heard details about this joker. I have heard details about him. How much evil he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. AKA, didn't you hear how he had Stephen murdered and executed? He kills people like us for fun. That's his hobby. I enjoy playing chess. He enjoys killing people. This guy's a crazy sociopath. I don't want to have anything to do with him. God, you're wrong. And then God continues. Okay, where am I? I lost my place. But Ananias answered, Lord, have you heard how many evil has done? And he has authority from the chief priests to build all he will call on your name. He's like, what, God? Okay, here's the deal. Surrender, and this is point 2. Point 3. I'm at point 3. Did I hit all the points? Okay. I lost my head there for a second. Point 3, surrender is a process. Surrender is a process. See, Ananias had to surrender to God. You see, Paul had to surrender all of his PhDs and all of his thoughts and everything he thought he knew, he had to surrender to God. But Ananias, God said, look, in order for this to work, I need you to play your part. He's like, bro, this is going to kill me. You see, surrendering to God takes time because there's a lot of you that you need to give up. And it goes layer through layer. And here's the great question. Why do we need to surrender? Glad you asked it, Marcus. 2 reasons why. First of all, God will not give you a shortcut to know him. You cannot get to know God secondhand. You can learn about God from me, but you can't have a relationship with God through me. You must know God yourself. And surrendering is the only way to get to know God yourself. And the second is like we talked earlier, how sin is a cancer. If you do not remove it, it will kill you. If you do not surrender to God, it will kill you. As I was praying about this, God showed me something. One of the greatest attacks of the enemy on our culture, right now, what's happening, is the need of now. The need that I need it now. You see, if the enemy can get you to focus on what you need now, you will be blinded. Or rather, if the enemy can get you focused on what you want now, you will be blinded to what you actually need later. Does that make sense? We are so used to getting things now, instantly. Amazon now. I love Amazon now. I have gas delivered to my car, okay? I want gas now. I push an app and they come and deliver me gas. I love now. But here's the issue. We oftentimes try to do our relationship with God now, and it takes time. The things you want aren't what you need. I was on a hike with my brother this last week. We're like, hey man, let's go a hike. And so I grabbed a small little water bottle. I'm like, oh, this will be fine. I don't want to have to carry the big water bottle. I don't want to have to deal with that because that's going to be too much and I'm going to have to lug it around. So I just want this small little water bottle. I'll be okay now. I'll be okay. So 4.5 miles into this hike, 100-degree weather, he is the map director, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, I took a wrong turn. We still have like 4.5 miles to get back. My water has 1 sip left in it. 1 sip left, so I was like, Lord, Lord. So I took my last sip, and the next 4 miles in the 100-degree heat were miserable. And the only thing I could think of was I wanted satisfaction now in the time, and I didn't prepare for what was going to happen later. And so the second half of my hike, as we were going, we were miserable. Our hands started swelling up. I couldn't even pull my ring off because my hands were so puffy. And he got his lost again, and so we're walking around for forever. And then we get to the water fountain at the end of the hike, and it doesn't work. And there's a good lesson in that for me. You see, the enemy tries to get us focused on what we want now. Yeah, you want to do that now. You want to live your life now. You want to do the way that you want to do it now, and that's fine. But here's the deal. Fun always turns to pain. Satisfaction always turns to emptiness. Success always turns to failure. Direction always turns to confusion. And identity always turns to insecurity. You see, the ways of the flesh, while they're good for a time, they always turn to destroy you because the enemy is out to kill you. If you are not totally surrendered to God, it will cost you everything. Surrendering is the only way to salvation. And you see, it's a process. You see on the bottom of your notes, there's like this cycle that kind of goes through and filters in. I wrote a large paper on that cycle, 50 pages. I'm going to give you the 2-sentence version. Here's the deal. As you pursue Christ, as you pursue surrendering to God, that process, you'll surrender again, and then you'll learn a little more. Oh, there's something else that I need to give to God. I haven't given God everything. And then you'll go through again. Oh, I need to surrender more. And then you go through again. And each time you go through it, you'll narrow in closer and closer to becoming like Jesus. So God continued to talk to Ananias. Verse 15. The Lord said to him, go. Ananias, I need you to go because Saul is a chosen instrument of my name. I need you to go. What if Ananias had never gone? What if Ananias had been disobedient? What if Ananias didn't go? So when Ananias went, he prayed, and scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he was able to see. You see, he could not see because he was blinded by what he wanted to do. But when he finally was willing to surrender everything about him, he began to see. Many of you guys are in here blinded because you have not yet surrendered your life to God. Some of you guys are walking the half-Christian life saying, I'm going to serve him sometimes, but I still want to have my fun. I still want to have my own thing. I still want to do it. And here's the reality. That is a cancer that will kill you. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to be real, saying I care about you too much to not say that. Look, sin always destroys. And the only way to save your life is to give it up to Christ. There's another verse. I read it last week, but I'm going to read it in detail right now. It's the Matthew verse, guys. I'm trying to find it. Where do I have it? Matthew 16, 24 through 26. If anyone would come after me, Jesus says, let him or her deny himself, and take up your cross and follow me. For whoever would save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. What does it profit a man or a woman if you gain the whole world and yet forfeit your soul? Look, surrender your life to Christ. I want you guys to close your eyes and think for a second. Some of you guys have never surrendered your life to Christ. You've never taken that step. And if you want to take that step right now, I want you to raise your hand. If you want to take, for the very first time, you want to surrender your life to Christ, raise your hand. I want to ask a second question. Some of you guys have surrendered your life to Christ, but there are pieces of your life that you have not totally surrendered to God. As you pray right now, as I've been talking, that thing came to your mind. Whether it's things you look at night, a relationship, a way of thinking, the way you dress, the way you present yourself to others, whatever it is. There is part of your life you have not surrendered to God. And if you are saying, God, it's going to be hard, but I'm willing to take that next step right now. And I need to surrender this to you because I know in the end it's going to kill me. If you want to surrender something to God, I want you to raise your hand. All right, now here's what I'm going to ask you to do. For those of you who raised your hand, this is for you. Here's the altar. The altar is not just a place that we have fun in. In the Old Testament, the altar is a place where people went and sacrificed something. They gave something up to God. So do not come up here if you are not willing to give something up to God. And it's not a thing where you give it up to God and then you come back next week and take it again, like what David talked on a month ago. This is something where you are sacrificing it to God, and what they would do is they would burn it. It would be totally consumed. There no more. If you want to say, God, I want to surrender this to you. Help me. I want to give this to you. I'm willing to sacrifice. I want you to come on up here. Come on up here. Those of you who raised your hand, you said, hey, I think I'm willing to take this step. If you are actually willing to take that step, bring it to the altar. Bring it to the altar and say, I surrender this to you, God. If it is your first time, if you raised your hand for the first time, come here. Come up here as well and say, God, I surrender my life to you. Now here's the deal. As you surrender your life to Christ, the cancer that is in you, the cancer that's destroying you, God brings healing. And we're going to declare that healing with one another. We're going to worship, surrender, lift your hands up to God, saying, God, I surrender to you. Because as God brings healing in your heart, as He brings restoration, as He does a miracle of taking your heart that was once headed for destruction and makes it towards headed towards life, as He heals you, declare the victory that you have in Jesus. God, we pray, we surrender our lives to you. We surrender each thing to you that is not of you. God, have your way. We no longer want to live in the pain and the frustration that comes with sin. But God, we want to have healing and victory in Jesus' name. In Jesus' name we pray. If you're in the back and you want to worship, you're invited to stand up and worship where you are. If you're down up here, sacrifice, surrender to God. In Jesus' name we pray.